whatever time of day it is in this dark room. My name is Elaine Leader, and I'm the Dean of the School of Social Sciences, and I was waiting for Darius to show up, but rather than to wait any longer, I've decided to start because it would be quite exciting to begin this discussion this evening. Now, I know Darius will come along, and he will have a lot of thank yous to give, but I particularly want to thank all the people who have sponsored this event, including, of course, the Holocaust Study Center, Holocaust and Genocide Study Center, as well as the Intercultural Center, as well as the IRA students' monies that have been able to pay for these wonderful series of lectures, as well as the School of Social Sciences, who have been sponsoring this, as well as associated students, and many, many other groups and organizations who've collaborated to bring a series of really remarkable speakers to our campus this year. I hope some of you were at the Cornell West event recently, where Louis Rodriguez, we have Luong today. It's all pretty exciting. This campus is becoming and has long been an exciting campus, but the intellectual pulse beat of this campus is quickening by having the kinds of speakers that we've had in this series this year. So I'm really thrilled today to introduce Luong, who, as those of you who have read part of her book know, is a survivor of the Cambodian genocide. She was born in 1970 to a middle-class family in Phnom Penh, and 5 years later, her family was forced out of the city through a mass evacuation into the countryside. By 1978, the Khmer Rouge had killed her parents, two of her siblings, and she was forced to train as a child soldier. In 1980, she and her older brother escaped by boat to Thailand, where they spent 5 months in a refugee camp, and they finally relocated to Vermont, Burlington, Vermont, sponsorship of the Holy Family Church. Many of you have read her memoir, First They Killed My Father, A Daughter of Cambodia Remembers, which was published in the year 2000, and has received numerous awards, including the Books for a Better World Literary Award. It's been translated in published in 11 countries, translated in German and Dutch and Norwegian and Danish and French and Spanish and Italian, Cambodian and Japanese. And Luong just told me that her second book will be out in April, also published by HarperCollins, and it'll be called Lucky Child, and it's about her surviving the genocide and a contrast with what happened with her sister, who stayed back in Cambodia. So it'll be quite a story. She's also working on her third book, having now returned to Cambodia at least 25 times. And her third book will be about the importance of acting globally as well as acting locally. I've just had a wonderful opportunity to chat with her, which I'm hoping that many of you will be able to do later. She is very charismatic and smart and funny, and told me about her experiences at the Democratic National Convention, meeting Barack Obama and other such luminaries. And for those of us who know survivors, my father having been a survivor of the Holocaust, and hers with the Cambodian genocide, we know times we look at our worlds and wondered, how did I get here when the rest of my family is dead? So today we have the honor of hearing Luong, and I bring her to the stage right now. Thank you.
Wow, thank you so much for that introduction, Elaine. Can I ask a quick favor? Could we just dim the light tiny bit? Maybe not. Anyway, it is a pleasure to be here. Okay. Oh, wow, I think they just dimmed the light a little because I can actually see you guys. I am height challenged for those of you who are curious, and therefore lights on normal people tend to just be right in my eyes. And I also like you to ask you to bear with me, please. This is, English is not my first language. It is my fourth. And when I am speaking or about to speak on something that is near and dear to my heart, it is often very nerve-wracking for me, so I will try in any other languages but English. Today I'm here to share with you a little bit about my experience of growing up in Cambodia and surviving the Khmer Rouge, and then we'll segment that into the possible tribunal, international tribunal, that is looking like it will take place sometime next year, or sometime later this year or next year, for the crimes against humanity, war crimes, and genocide that the Khmer Rouge committed. Here in Sonoma, I think often we can look at the beautiful surrounding, different parts of the country where I'm from, where I've traveled to, and think that we are sheltered from the outside world. But with CNN and the internet and everything that we're able to access, we know that we're not sheltered. We know that the world is just encroaching into our space every day. As a child, I didn't know anything about America. I didn't know anything about the outside world, the international community. I didn't know anything about the Vietnam War as it was steadily moving into Cambodia. I know that Cambodia is a small country the size of the state of Oklahoma with a population of 7 million people, was a neutral country in the war that was called the Third Indochina War. I didn't know anything about the Soviet Union, the superpowers, the Chinese, and the US supporting and fighting in various theaters in Vietnam, Cambodia, and Laos. And I didn't care about that. And we can talk a little bit more about the history of Cambodia later on in the discussion and question period. All I knew was, as a child, my parents were the most important thing in my life. My parents and my family. My father, as a high-ranking military officer, his job afforded us a lifestyle privilege. My mother at 5'7" was an Amazon in our society. With 7 kids, she was a super domestic engineer as well. I lived my life with my 3 brothers and sisters. My brothers were all so very cool back in the 70s as they listened to their Beatles and Elvis songs on their 8-track tapes, danced to their music in their bell-bottom pants, which are back in. And they were so enthralled with Elvis in the 70s, which unfortunately also had the trend to have sideburns. Americans, that's fine, but for a lot of Asians, especially men, I know there are always exceptions, they just can't grow sideburns. What ended up is these long pieces of hair that curls up like curly cues. My sisters and I fought so loud and so often, my father threatened to replace us with monkeys. We lived in a house full of modern amenities such as toilets and flushing toilets and washing machines. We lived in a house full of toys and clothes and music and dance, and across the street there were people and culture. My father was a big believer in education. In Cambodia, the population at the time was 85% of the people were Buddhist and agricultural people. They lived their lives revolving around Buddhist festivals, farmings, and marriages. But in my life, we were made to go to school 3 times a day, 6 days a week, studying English, French, Chinese, Cambodian. And on Sunday, on our day off, my father would allow us to either go to the movie theaters or to the swimming pool. As a child, my fondest memory was of going, all of us as a family, across the street to the movie theaters, where in the dark, my father would cross his leg that perfect way, creating that perfect bottom of lap. And in the dark, I would have my favorite drink, soybean drink, my favorite movie food, fried crickets, much crunchier than popcorn, doesn't get stale, goes really good with beer, but you're underage, I'm sorry. And in the dark, I would sit on his lap, and I would squirm and move around, and when I got bored of holding my food, I would just gently nudge him. Without a word, he would just turn his palms upward, and I would put my food and drinks into his hands. In Cambodia, we didn't have cup holders, but when you had parents, you didn't need them. My father's lap was my chair, his arms were my armrest, and his hands were my cups. I had everything. I didn't need anything else. But that charmed life came to an end on 1975, April 17th. I was but 5 years old. And I remember playing on the street, playing hopscotch with my sister when the storm of trucks, the Khmer Rouge, the communist group, came roaring into the city. I didn't know anything about the communists. And I saw them standing body to body in their black clothes, big smiles in their face. And war came in to my front door. Unlike us, many people living in America, my war didn't come in via the television screen, the radio, the newspapers. I couldn't get it off, couldn't turn it off, couldn't avoid it. And the soldiers came in. And at first we were cheering because they said the war is over. And right after that, they were raising their guns, shooting into the air, and they said, you must leave. Pack as little as you can to sustain you for 3 days. And once after that, you can come back, but we had to leave because the Americans were going to bomb the city. And if we didn't leave, we would die. It took me many years to realize that the scars of wars and bombs took many more than 3 days to disappear. But I was 5 years old. I didn't know anything. My parents hastily packed food, what little food and clothing we had, and all of us poured out into the city. The city I was born in, Phnom Penh, had a population of 2 million people. It was evacuated in 72 hours. Now, when 9/11 happened and I was living in Washington, D.C., and there were talks of evacuations, of people leaving, of upcoming war, for many people in America, it was a concept. But for me, it was a reliving of the war's past. We came to America to look for safety. If we had to leave America, where would we go? As a result of the post-traumatic experiences of many Cambodians who have gone through that first evacuation, after 9/11, mental health agencies all over the country saw a 50% spike in refugees seeking help. But I was a child then, and I didn't know, and so we left. And we moved and walked. The soldiers' life was how well they farm, how productive they are in the field. And so the Khmer Rouge, the communists, closed down the borders of Cambodia, expelled all foreigners, kicked everybody out, evacuated all Cambodians from all the cities, and made everybody to live in the countryside. Now imagine what would happen if New Yorkers, San Franciscoans, Chicago's and Boston and all the city people were forced out of the regime 3 years, 8 months, and 24 and 28 days for your whole college career. Every day consisted of only Mondays. There would be no Fridays, Saturdays, weekend holidays. And every Monday was a work day. Imagine if you were quarantined in Sonoma State for 4 years. If this was Cambodia, and everything you knew in your past life were persecuted or abandoned, the teachers, the students, people who spoke a different language, people who traveled to another country, people of different race, heritage. And they had these people executed en masse. And still everywhere they looked, they saw more traitors and people who could speak out. And so they sent out more soldiers. And they looked for the wives and the children of people they've killed. And my father, to be able to stare at a glorious sunset and not want to stab an instrument into my stomach and scream in pain and in anger and in rage. And yet, I didn't understand why that was going on until I wrote my book. And when my father walked off, that first night, I didn't ask the gods to help him escape, to make sure he was alive, for him to be out in the mountains summoning of rebellious armies. I didn't ask him to come back to me. I prayed only for the gods to make sure that his death was quick and painless. I didn't want him to suffer. I was 7 years old. In Cambodia today, they've discovered over 20,000 mass graves. Majority of them, over 1 million skulls. Somebody's fathers and families were killed with blunt instruments to the back of their heads. For traitors, the communist Khmer Rouge believed did not deserve a quick death. Bullets were saved for the enemies, for warfare. Traitors were killed quickly and pushed into mass graves. I don't know what really happened to my father. I've not heard from him again except for in spirits. But I do know that he's not here, that he's not on the earth anymore. Because even as a child, I knew that my father didn't just love me, he adored me. And if he was alive, there would be no land, no landmines, no warfare left that could keep him away from me. And 3 months after he was taken, my mother gathered us around and said, I cannot take care of you. I want you to leave. You walk south, you go north, you go east, you go west. Find an orphanage. Take a different name. Pretend that I'm dead already. And I didn't want to. She turned me by my shoulders, pushed me out the door with a swat on the butt and said, I don't want you. And I thought she was weak. I thought she wasn't strong enough to keep us together. And it took me so many more years to realize she was the strongest woman I'll ever meet. To have that strength to send off your kids into the war zone, not know if they would live or die, be tortured, be killed, be raped. I just don't know if I could have done it. I travel a lot now in my life, the revolution. And in order to protect the country and the revolution and myself, I had to take people out first. Because people out there were dangerous. And if they came and they saw me and they captured me, I would be raped, tortured, and killed. And when they weren't brainwashing me, and when you were sitting around playing balls and in gym class, I was out in the fields for hours on end learning how to run in zigzag lines. Because when there was only a hole, I had to brush bits and pieces of brain off my sleeves to survive. I couldn't wake up from my war. No one ever asked me the way they're asking me now with the publication of my book, if my life was too difficult to live. People ask me if my book is too difficult for people to read. It should be difficult. United, knew that we needed a better way. We wanted to find a way to have a second chance at life. We made the decision to leave the country, to go and try to make our ways to America. And there were only 2 ways to come to America then. You either walk the land and cross into the border of Cambodia to the refugee camp in Thailand. But to do that, you have to cross the landmines, Boston or New York, places where there are diverse people. We were told we were coming to a place called Essex Junction, Vermont. I asked them if this was like LA, which I was seeing on screen. They said yes. It wasn't. When I arrived in Vermont on June 10th, 1980, I was shocked to discover that there were more black on cows. It was very scary. Vermont still is today the whitest state in America. For more diversity, I moved to Maine, the second whitest state in America. People in Vermont didn't know anything about Cambodia, and they didn't know that Cambodia had just gone through a war. So our sponsor really wanted to introduce American culture to us. So they took us to the 4th of July fireworks display. We went into therapy for many years. When the first firework display happened, I was trying to get underneath the bench because I thought the war was coming again. And then there was the language barrier. People didn't know that it wasn't abusive for my sister-in-law to feed me rice 3 times a day, 7 days a week. We like rice. We didn't like Uncle Ben's rice. We didn't like instant rice that you can make in 5 minutes. They didn't understand also why we were so enamored with colors. That first fall, as the mountains of Vermont were ablaze in red and gold and magenta, and the world which is filled with all these brilliant colors, we fell in love. For 4 years, I had been forced to wear black shirts for every exception, for the rules, and none of the native speakers seems to know the rules themselves. I ask you, why is grass not grasses in plural? You can't tell me, you just tell me it sounds right. I don't have this thing in my head that says it sounds right. And then you have words that sound exactly like each other. Windshield, wind chill. People thought I had an accent, which I did. Took years of speech therapy before they understood I actually said bucket and not book it. And then there were the abbreviations. In class one day, in my finance class, I was given the assignment of giving a talk on CD, certificate of deposit. My assignment was to take $2,000, find ways to invest it, and I worked really hard, got up the next day, and well, if you, instead of spending it, you buy a CD, you compound the interest, and you have all this money left over when you're 22, and instead of investing it in a great vacation, you could invest it in a really nice condom in Florida. It really should be condom and not condo. Of course, people didn't really understand, and I didn't have anybody like you to help us to struggle with it myself. And then one assignment that was a lot of fun in English, which was my hardest topic. I was given the assignment in a spelling class. You remember when you're given a big word, you're supposed to find little words in your big word. My word was Saturday. I worked really hard, went up the next day. Saturday, I wrote it down. And then there's the word sat, about how hungry you were on your 6th birthday. You chewed on a piece of charcoal and pretended it was cake. And then you talk about it in a lecture, and they buy you a lot of food. And then you do international tours in Italy and Japan, and they buy you a lot of food everywhere. That's a really cool thing. So I was very lucky, and I made it to America, and I learned, and I survived. The rest of the world, to the rest of the world it might be over, but to survivor it is not. 120 million people gone through some kind of wars in the last century. For those of us with family members who went through it ourselves, it is not over. And so even though while I lived in America, in a place, in a land of peace, at night the soldiers were still after me. They were still trying to kill me. I dream of grabbing them and slicing their neck, and remembering how the blood was splattering me and why it took me so long, and then realizing that I would grab the butter knife. And when I went through puberty and started my menstruation, for a lot of girls, it's just about the process of going from girls to women. And in the 80s, they didn't tell you anything about the chemical changes as well as the physical changes. And that much blood coming from a human body, it meant that they were either dead or dying. And so I thought I was dying. And I attempted suicide numerous times. I didn't want to die slowly in pain the way I've witnessed other people. I wanted to end quickly. For my sister in Cambodia, it wasn't a matter of crouching underneath the bench to hide away from the 4th of July fireworks. It was literally still to escape the landmines that still tainted today 50% of Cambodia's land and 50% of the villages. I've been back to Cambodia 25 times now, and it is a beautiful country. I'm so ready to move there now. Except that to do my work, I needed to be in America where I can be heard louder. Cambodia is a fledgling democracy. The people are slowly healing, but 50% of the people are still suffering from traumatic stress. They are friendly, wonderful people who do not understand and do not have this sense of entitlement that they need to have protection. But when it is given, they are very grateful. I've been very busy in America, busy surviving. As a child, when I was 10 until I was 25, my whole focus was to be just like you, to be my sister again. I focused on becoming an American girl. I learned about color coordination. In the 80s, I became a cheerleader, which I thought was cool. I tried to be very trendy, which unfortunately at the time, the hairstyle was just like Farrah Fawcett, the little feather style. Asian hair is very difficult to feather. Well, at the time, which unfortunately was Valley Girl language, where we started every sentences and ended with duh and gag me. Unfortunately, I never quite got the expression right. So instead of saying gag me with a spoon, I often went around and go, gag me with a fork or a knife. I wanted to be where billions of dollars is needed to make a difference. The 15,000 people we've helped, we've committed $158 maybe per person per year. If they needed a full leg, we can make a leg for the price of a sneaker, a pair of sneakers that you buy. So imagine if for prosthetic limbs, and first of all, the second most painful injury, second to burns. When you step on it, everything below you, rock, dirt, toenail, grass, bones, becomes secondary missile, shooting up to your leg, disintegrating your flesh, melting off your leg. And if you get amputations made, 50% of the time you need to have an amputation, and you survive, with a prosthetic leg, you can walk, you can work, you could bite, you could live. Veterans. And I swear every other week they would come in and tell me how their limbs, some of my colleagues, how their limbs were killing them and hurting them. My colleague Ed Miles used to say that to me, and I said, Ed, you have no legs. You have no toes. You left them in Cambodia. He'd tell me this thing called phantom pains. Even though the limbs aren't there, he can still feel the pain. He wakes up, takes his medication, he rationalizes it, and then he can get himself out of it. For kids who've been hurt, have sustainable help as well. Now, I know all of you. I know for a fact, all of you have more than one pair of shoes in your closet. A lot of you have cars, or access to trains, or planes, or automobiles, buses. If you're Cambodian, or one of the 18,000 people every year in Cambodia who've been hurt by landmines, right now, humanitarian aid to programs like ours that are providing sustainable help to victims of landmines and victims of war. For the 15,000 people we helped in Cambodia, and we have centers in 14 other countries, in Vietnam, in El Salvador, in Kosovo, in Bosnia, Sierra Leone, Mozambique, Angola. For all these people, whose we give limbs to, and therefore investing in peace. They do not want to hurt Americans. They become friends. They want and need our help. And so we have to be there to provide sustainable help. And I'm running slow on time, so I'm just going to talk a little bit about the other thing that I spent a lot of my time with. When I first started in human rights, it was in 1997. I was young, didn't really know how to speak English very well. Was very nervous about speaking in front of, was very afraid I was going to spit at people in the front row. And so I got out there and wanted to tell the stories of Cambodia, the stories that the world needs to know beyond Cambodia, the stories of genocide that still continues to happen every day in our world, the stories of crimes against humanity and war crimes that hurts every one of us, whether we're Cambodians or American. I couldn't get people to hear me. And so I did what every other Americans would do. I wrote a tell-all book about my life. And then I got on TV and talked about it. And unfortunately, unlike all the TV shows, after 10 minutes of talking, and a lot of people stood up and applauded, I still wasn't healed. I was still hurting. Incited Nation to Australia, where thousands of kids are reading my book because it's required reading. To American University, where my book was required reading freshman seminar. To Yale University, to be on TV and interview on Today's Show by Matt Lauer. To hang out with Angelina Jolie because she was in Cambodia working on landmines. And all these trips to eat a lot of good food and not pay for it. It was really a thing. And so I wrote my book. And I've been so surprised. I expected it to sell 10 copies and go into this literary black hole. My publisher had warned me that books like mine have a few weeks of shelf life, maybe. And 4 years later, I'm still getting letters from all over the world, and the book is still being read in all these different languages. And as a result of that, I'm putting out my second book, timing it with a period when I think the tribunal for the Khmer Rouge, to try them for war crimes, crimes against humanity, and genocide. Of the 2 million Cambodians who were killed, can you believe there's been no tribunals to punish the perpetrators, to increase awareness, to educate the communities of what happened in all of the world? And so I for take place in similar to what they did with Bosnia. They were looking at domestic courts, like the Rwanda, where the tribunal would take place in Cambodia with Cambodian judges. And they were looking at the truth and reconciliation process, where the process would focus on the victims and not the perpetrators. After 5 years of negotiation, they've signed an agreement on a tribunal. But in looking at the tribunal, they sent in experts to Cambodia, interviewed thousands of people, survivors and scholars alike, and they came away with the 7 themes of why Cambodia needed a tribunal. And the first one is for peace, for the world body to recognize that Cambodia needed peace, and in order to do that, they needed to look at the past. And the second one the Cambodian people all had a hand in the creation of the Khmer Rouge, of the Khmer Rouge coming into power. And I firmly believe that if it weren't for the U.S. encroaching Vietnam War into Cambodia, the Khmer Rouge would not have had the power to take over the country. They also wanted amnesty for the lesser participants who were forced to commit crimes against humanity, like the child soldier. When my parents were killed and I was 8 years old, and I was served for the crimes I committed as an 8-year-old. And they wanted establishment of the law. How do you in a country enforce laws of murders and corruptions when the biggest mass murder that took place in your country that every single person in Cambodia suffered from? Now imagine a population of 280 million Americans and not a single population did not lose a single family member to the war. And lastly, and most importantly, I think they need an education. The genocide today in Cambodia is not being taught in school. In Cambodia, except for grade 12 level. Majority of kids do not make it to grade 12. Cambodia has a 70% illiteracy rate. When kids teen PBS on the Vietnam War on Cambodia, of which I did, I had to read books after books on my own and not have a professor to discuss it with, to learn from. I had to find and reach out to professors who were kind enough to take time out to share with me what happened. Education is so important if we are to learn from the past, to make sure that it does not repeat itself. During that time, those that were primarily targeted were the elite, the doctors, the writers, the builders, people who spoke different languages. After the war, 60% of the people were women and children, many of them were farmers. How do you rebuild a country in time of peace when you have no leaders? So Cambodia took a long time to rebuild, unlike Thailand and Japan and Vietnam. They had a generation of young people to get an education. And in Cambodia, they had to survive because the Khmer Rouge didn't surrender until 1998. So people like me who left the country and got an education outside really needed to go back and share and learned, more than share, learned from the people who stayed behind because they have so much to teach us as well. In my travels to Cambodia, not something you tell your neighbors and friends and uncle and hope they'll work for it. Peace is not something you think, I deserve it, so therefore I will have it. Peace is something that we must choose, decide on, and work for it every day in every aspect and every level of our lives, locally and globally. I am not, and many of us, to be honest, are not automatically peaceful people. I still have bad days, and especially have unpeaceful bad days in movie theaters. I love movies. I love thrillers. I love movies where I don't know the end until the end. I hate it when people are in movie theaters and talk through the whole thing. I hate it when they tell me when before the movie's over. And in the dark, I sit there and I look at their head, the profile of which I think to myself, a strategic kick to the head ought to do it. I'll knock them out right in borders of a country. As a result of my work, I see myself as an international world citizen. So we work for peace in our country and globally. We work for peace in our world. It is something that we can choose. And the other thing my travel to Cambodia has taught me, the survivors of the Cambodians who've been hurt, who've seen their entire families wiped out. I have a friend who is director of the Cambodian Documentation Center, where he's working with a staff of 35, collected over 800,000 documents of the Khmer Rouge that will be used to support the tribunal. He witnessed his sister, his pregnant sister, who was accused of stealing rice. The soldier didn't believe him, didn't believe her, so they knifed her and opened up her stomach. And now he's working for peace. He has taught me that if I have witnessed in my short life in a few specific people, I know this to be a fact. I have also seen in my life, blessedly, the best in man's humanity to man. And that is for our choosing as well. In all this, we know when we realize this, I know when I realize these two philosophies, that we do and can affect change. We just have to choose it, decide on it, and act on it locally and globally. And I'll end it with that and take questions. Thank you. In Cambodians, my sister's words when I had to translate their words into English words, but also their meanings, because often words don't have a literal translation in English.
Yeah. What kind of language are you speaking? I mean, is it Cambodian all the time in Cambodia, or do they? I mean, does it have a language that
Yeah. I speak Chinese, Cambodian, and French. When I'm in Cambodia, I speak also English, and it really depends on different groups of people. In Cambodia, I speak mostly bad food for hurting other people, and I think to who my parents were and know that they were pretty cool, decent people. And if they were to love me, I couldn't be that bad. As a child, that helped. I think strengths are not a constant thing. There are things that we go through life and take what we need at certain times in my life. When I was going through the war, the strength that my parents loved me came in, and that was very beneficial, very helpful to me. And also my anger sent me out and made sure I was angry. And I thought back then that I didn't understand it. Now I realize how well she knew me, how well she knew to push the button that was my strength to make me angry so I would survive. With that said, it really wasn't until the publication of my book that I realized that my anger might have kept my physical body alive, but it was the love of my family and my parents, my sin, and my spirit alive. I know a lot of Cambodians who are still suffering and going through a lot of post-traumatic stress and not been able to climb out of the war. And for me, I've been able to have that through my life, and that really helped me not be in a mental institution. As an adult, learning in my degree in political science and traveling, and learning of the injustices that are still happening everywhere in the world. Is that? How lucky are we? And how insane is it that people like myself, my families, and the 120 million people who survived their wars, the Holocaust, Rwanda, Kosovo, after they've survived their wars in all these countries where there are remnants of weapons left over, they're having a hard time surviving the peace. That is insane. My parents sacrificed everything so I could, not so my sister could take a wrong step off the beaten track and get blown up. Injustices and human rights abuses all over the world, child soldiers in Cambodia, child prostitutions and AIDS, poverties. And yet, how frustrating it is to know also that we have such power and we willingly give it up. As a child, I had this insane curiosity my father always loved. I was interested in worms. I was interested in the big padded bras my mother wore. I was really interested in big boobs. In Cambodians, that was a big thing. Asian with huge knockers were. I admit it. If you ever go to Angkor Wat, which is this 12,000-year-old temple with beautiful sculptures of Apsara, the dancing goddess, you'll notice on majority of the dancing, I can guarantee, and I don't know this for sure, but if we can talk to them, I can almost guarantee to you that their last thought and prayers was not so they could stay alive, so they can be rich and famous and do this and do that. They just want to stay alive so that they can take that next breath. They can live that next moment to see their families and loved ones. But even their families and loved ones, so they can take that breath. We have it, but we willingly give it all away. So as an adult, that is my strength, my curiosity, my appreciation of how lucky we are. And I just want to work my hardest so other people in the world can just be, if not just as lucky as I am, just a little bit luckier so they can survive. Thank you. Thank you. The weapon of man, one leg, one life at a time. There's a lot being done. The three main things that are being done that continue to be done is one, education. Kids who grew up years after the war, not knowing anything about the Khmer Rouge or the Americans, they know about landmines. They need to know what it looks like. We have programs where instead of books of Barbie dolls, they have books on the covers of cover with landmines pictures, so they know. They need to be educated about landmines. They need to know that if they see it on landmines, not to go there, how to protect themselves. We have traveling shows, we have plays, we have comic books that are educating people on landmines. DC Comics worked with the international campaign to create a Batman series on Batman working with landmines. And then unfortunately, they were doing this and putting the books in El Salvador and freaked out the kids there. Because in El Salvador, parents were taken away from men wearing dark clothes and with masks on a lot. And so they created a DC comic of Superman working with with landmines. So there's a number of things we're doing. The second thing we need to do is demining. There are units of people out there by Cambodian groups, the CMAC, Cambodian Mine Action Group, Mine Action Center, Norwegian group, British group, the US expats, training Cambodians to go out there and clear the earth of landmines. And that's going to take many, many more years to clear Cambodia of landmines. They are now clearing, the lands will always be fine because 500,000 animals step on the mines and all these people. They go out, one team put on a mask, get on the stomach for more stability, sweep the land in front of the metal detector. First of all, it consists of two weapons system, a metal detector and a knife or a bayonet of some sort. They sweep the metal detector. Every time it beeps, a guy or girl gets down, probe the knife into a 45-degree angle into the land, and hope they don't detonate the land of the mine. Sustainable help to victims of landmines. And that is to support centers where we manufacture prosthetic limbs, arms, wheelchairs, so that the victims of landmines can have mobility and have a chance to walk and work. Because they don't get sick, they're not going to die early. It's not like the other people who are sick from various diseases. I go back since 1997, and I see the same people over and over again, and they're healthy. They're just coming back, and they're just walking on prosthetic limbs. And that is what I focus in providing sustainable help to people. So those are the three things that have been done in Cambodia. Yes, sir.
Thank you. I've read that in Cambodia, a lot of the Khmer Rouge are integrated in society. The survivor can see on the street somebody that committed an execution on his family. How was that experience in Cambodia?
Yeah. In Cambodia, the survivors process, which is why Cambodians decided to go with the mixed tribunal system and decided that in their anywhere between 7 to 15 members of the Central Committee members of the Khmer Rouge regime, those who were at the top who made the decision, who signed people's death warrants. The rest of the people who were believed that under crimes, under threats of death and execution themselves, acted and hurt other people. I think it's going to be many more decades. I've known people who lived in villages. I have not had the strength to meet them myself. I've been asked to go and interview Khmer Rouge members, and the thought of shaking hands with them makes my skin crawl. I can't do it. I'm not able to do it. When Pol Pot, the Khmer Rouge leader, died, and the rest of the world were shown images of this grandfatherly figure who was written about as a gentle man, a charismatic man, a good father to his years old when he was killed. If I could have reached my hand into the television screen and wrapped my fingers around his neck and squeezed, I would have done it. So I myself am not in that position of where I'm healed enough to do it yet. Healing is a personal journey. It's an individual journey. And slowly, I think we are all, in Cambodians and all of us in different lives are working on it. For me, at this point, I'm just taking my strength, and for other people, it's very different.
I was just curious about you still have your siblings over there in Cambodia, right?
Yes.
And I'm curious as to if you're in the process of having them immigrate, or if they're not interested, or how that goes.
Yeah. I still have a brother. One of my brother eventually, my brother Kim, was able to escape Cambodia in 1990. In the U.S., it's been very difficult to sponsor. I mean, if you're a parent and you have a child or a child and a parent, it is a lot easier to sponsor your children. But for siblings, that doesn't have as much stature and as much value in the U.S. immigration policy. So we have been unable to sponsor my family members. I still have a brother and a sister in Cambodia. My sister's 2 years older than I am, with 5 kids. They still live in a village where there's only electricity from 6 to 9, if it comes on at all. But she's very happy, and they have not been to America. After first political instability and lack of political and diplomatic relations between the U.S. and Cambodia, and then it was SARS, and there was the Asian market crisis, and it was the worst flood in Cambodia in 75 years, and now it's bird flu. It's been very difficult to bring my families and sisters in, and we were hoping to be able to bring them to visit this year. But right now, the case and the story that's making the world is the bird flu that's taking place in Cambodia, Vietnam, and Laos. So chances are they're not going to allow them in that easily. But they've never been.
I guess I was just curious if they were, maybe it's so that they were
Yeah.
choosing to stay. They would come.
They actually wouldn't choose it anymore. My sister is now 36 years old, has got a family. They're very happy there. I actually would move to Cambodia. I am so ready to move there. A lot of my friends that have heard me talk about Cambodia since 1997 have actually moved there, my American friends, and with their American boyfriends or British boyfriend are now living there in Cambodia. And I have a lifestyle where we live behind walls and closed windows, for weather, for privacy. In Cambodia, when I go to Cambodia to see my sisters, we live in a room with 15 people. There's no such thing as having your own space. When I go to the room by myself to read, some little kid, some little person or old person will just come in and keep me company. Aren't you lonely? Aren't you scared? The village raised a child. Everybody lives together. My brothers, my sister. Over 100 ungs have now grown out, and we're still together. It's a very communal society. And they wouldn't understand that my brother, that we lock our doors at night and people have to call first before you can come and visit. And that for them is the scary part of American lifestyle.
And just one more question.
Yep.
I'm excited for your book.
Thank you.
Is she going to be a part of her voice in there, or are you just going to tell her story?
I am telling her story through her point of view. I think in a genre where we run, majority of memoirs that are being read over the world are written in English. And I think the world is ready to hear other voices. And just because she can't write in English, and she can't write in Cambodian, and she's illiterate, it doesn't mean, and it's not right, that her stories can't be heard. And if anybody has a right to claim her story and her voice, it's absolutely me. So the story is written in her voice and her point of view. And I just got my first review from a book review, Booklist review, and they gave it a star review. And they actually said that I, exact quote, daringly used the parallel stories and the her point of views, and was remarkably successful at it. So.
Thank you very much for the courage to tell your story, share.
By 120. And so with the landmass, the U.S. not wanting to be part of the international treaty, and for many specific reasons that are very long and winded.
Thank you. One other sort of follow-up. I remember those times when you were going through that. I remember I was a young person here. I was a teenager here. And I remember those things going on. And
Very difficult, but Archibald MacLeish, 2020 from Westmoreland, who who you know, the whole thing of actually in McNamara, who also the Secretary of National Security, said during the Vietnam War that we lost the war because we don't know the people. And that's exactly it. How much do we know about our neighbors? We don't know. And even in Cambodia right after the war, I mean, it's hard even with my book for people to realize what it was like, because we don't, even though it's at the doorstep of many people, we're not listening with our hearts. You know, when I was growing up, I didn't know anything about it. And I even gone through Cambodia. I didn't know about the war, and I didn't know anything about Cambodia. And I remember at one time driving back from Vermont to Maine, and was very distraught, and was going through another episode and talking to my parents. And I figured out, Hillary Clinton talks to Eleanor Roosevelt, I can talk to my mother. Said, you know, I'm having a really difficult time. I really need help. I need you to do two things for me. One, show me that there are angels out there looking out after me. And two, show me survivors, show me Holocaust survivors who've not only gone through what they went through, but are thriving. Not just surviving, but are thriving with family, with love, and are doing all right and not want to kill themselves. Then I got home, and I opened my mailbox, and there was a catalog on angels. Not mine. So I was thinking, no. And then I went home, and I turned on the TV, and Oprah was doing a show on Holocaust survivors, specifically the story of a woman who was rescued by an American GI and then found love and then had babies. And I thought, my gosh. But I share this story because I didn't ask them to show me Cambodian survivors or the survivors. I only knew about the Holocaust survivors. But that was after I saw that my parents gave me sign. I went on and read the most influential book in my life, quarter at a tune of $300,000 for this 1.2 museum was from the Jewish community in Chicago. So we've gotten huge support from Jewish communities for the Cambodian plight. Yeah. Yay!
Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
I read your book. It's very moving, very painful.
Sorry, I had it in my notes, but I didn't say it before everybody left. None of us got here on our own, and I'm so grateful for all those people who not only live the philosophy of work globally and locally, because without all of them, whose names I'll never know and faces I'll never see, the chances of me being here today would have been very, very slim. So I'm just so grateful for all the people, maybe people in your life, maybe your families, your grandmother, it's because of all their actions I'm here today. So if I don't get to see them and you know them, please thank them for me as well. Thank you.
Thank everybody for coming. I do want to thank the committee